you and I are going to kick things off differently today. We're going to come up with a wish list. We could even call it a laundry list of things we don't see in many new cars today. Got to start with the obvious, output. I'm thinking a bare minimum 350 horsepower or so. Then how about suspension setup? Because I'm kind of sick of McPherson struts, maybe double wishbones. And then from there, I know this is getting really exotic here, but how about a chassis control system that's not designed just to comply with like Washington and Brussels, like one of these brake activated torque vectoring systems? How about one of these like old school chassis control systems that involves the transmission, retard the timing, and then layer on a couple like super duper whiz bang computers? And then let's wrap it in kind of a screwed up color, maybe baby blue, and then we'll give it one of these cool names like Mallorca blue. No? How about Minnesota blue? That doesn't have a ring to it. I'm going to work on the color name, but today we're going to drive that wish list. Welcome to the stunning roads of Mallorca, specifically between Palma and the thriving metropolis of Inca. Wanted to challenge this a bit more because the engine's all new. Well, not all new to us because we drove this engine a couple of islands over, well, really far over in Greece last year, but now smaller car, lighter car. Let's put our foot into it, and this is all uphill. Go around this. God, even the barrier is beautiful here. Look at this. You know, this never had problems before in the previous Macan S, but now what's happening is the power delivery is a bit sharper. As we get further up the road into more stunning natural wonders of Mallorca, why does it deliver power quicker or more sharper? Well, we talked a little bit about it in the tech review, and it comes down to the placement of the turbocharger in the V. Now, the logic is by putting it there and bringing the catalytic converter a little closer, what happens is it gets the temperature, the operating temperature of the engine into a more optimal space quicker, thus the engine can operate more efficiently, thus deliver power more efficiently. But what does that mean out here? Well, I put my foot into it and it can deliver torque way down low. So what was this, like 1800 it's delivering peak torque, but that's in theory not on the island of Mallorca. Here, a lot of technical turns, and believe it or not, the road gets even more stunning the farther you go down. The benefits are all the same as we saw in the Cayenne, then the Panamera, but here, this is at least 500 pounds lighter than the lightest version of those two cars. So more power, delivers the power a bit quicker in a smaller, lighter package. That's never really a bad thing, unless you have a rental Citroën in front of you that slows you down. Then it's no match, and there you're back to just being a slow car. So if you guys follow me on Instagram, you most likely have met Kumo's Canadian cousin, the beautiful Cleo here. And when I got here, she was a little angry with me because she saw the tech review that I did in Spain and the Macan. I know I'm trying to tell them. She said I forgot the brakes, the diameter of the brakes. On the basic car, the one we're going to drive, the Macan 4-cylinder turbo, that has 350 mil diameter brakes all the way around. But on the S we're driving today, the V6, that has 360 mil diameter rotors all the way around. Is that okay for you? Is that good for you? You want to go now? Okay. Did my work, so she's off. Now we're getting into the more forestry part of the gorge here. Let's put our foot into it, understand some of the differences in the setup and driving dynamics, and this is definitely some tight roads. Please don't try this at home. So this, you need to understand, technically is set up as a sports car. This one was fitted with Porsche Torque Vectoring Plus, PASM, Air Ride, and that's important to know because we drove a car this morning, didn't have Air Ride, but had PASM. So adjustable dampers wasn't as composed as this one here. So the first thing I'm going to say here is the obvious. this needs to be fitted with air ride for the most composure if one is pushing it on roads like these. Just driving around town PASM is more than enough. So now that we both understand each other, let's put this into full fat mode on the sport suspension. Put our foot into it much more aggressively, as if we haven't been driving aggressive enough. Please don't try this at home. We got a nice little elevation change. That's wonderful. You can clearly tell what's happening is it gets not only more composed, but it takes away some of the lean. It takes away any of the squat in the back. This doesn't really have dive in the front. Like, notice I'm putting my foot to the brake pretty hard there. As an aside, this is fitted with steel rotors, not the carbon ceramics, which are on offer. Not something I would suggest in a vehicle like this, because unless you're taking it on a track, but even then, the steel rotors on these, as we learned in Bahrain, fade free. So why would one want to spend $9 grand when you can put it into a Burmester stereo, which you could use around town? Anyway, so once again, as the road becomes more challenging, it gets down to this. It's not a matter of Cayenne is higher or Macan is less. It's because this thing is set up the way it is in driving dynamics. It's a function of, does one want more of a sporty driving utility with less utility, or does one want more utility? In that case, it's a Cayenne. In this case, it's a sharper tool for a utilitarian vehicle. Get it? So apparently someone was jealous that a beautiful young lady got screen time and he didn't. This is Cleo's really beautiful and very big brother, Caesar. He wanted to come on and share with you that the front and the back of the Macan have been changed ever so slightly. The front kind of looks like the width of the new Panamera, that kind of stuff. But notice the back, it's got that like Carrera 4S taillight thing, and here comes the beautiful young lady stealing the show, as per usual. The taillight thing has been changed in the back. It's an old design trick where if you put a horizontal line across the front or back of a vehicle, it adds to the width of a vehicle. And this one really is not a hugely wide vehicle compared to other Porsches. So I'm going to turn this around and think of this as like an additional question. Forget about the trick. Do you like the look of the revised taillight in the Macan as opposed to the body-colored rear liftgate that just says Macan? Let me know in the comments below, because Caesar, even though he went over there, he'd still like to know. So a couple things going on here. This one is loaded to the gills. It's got the Alcantara headliner, steering wheel, full leather. But the thing that's interesting, we talked about this in tech review, the bigger screen here. Been using this all day, and it's the same UX that's in the Panamera we just drove, the Cayenne we drove last year, and it just makes this whole experience a bit more usable. Now here's the thing, the trade-off, the vents go down here. I'm not a big fan of the look of the vents here. There's one thing that wasn't changed that I'm incredibly thankful for, and that is real buttons, real toggle switches. And I've pissed and moaned about this before, that I feel the haptic feedback that's now in the Cayenne and the Panamera, it's pretty to look at when the car is sitting and doing nothing, but this is more about safety. And after now spending more than half a day with this thing, you have kind of like a muscle memory of sorts, in that you know that the sport mode button for the suspension is here. You know that the exhaust button is here, and it's not something you have to look at when you drive. You can go right to it, and then all of a sudden you see the changes in the UX up here. So consider this an open letter to the folks in Zuffenhausen. Can we go back to real buttons and toggle switches in the Panamera and the Cayenne? Other than that, those vehicles are great. So let's use this as a reference and maybe go back in time. For safety. Thank you. Or vielen Dank. Nine years ago, I founded the show based on a couple of principles. Paramount being, I never like to tell you what you can see. Now, unless you missed the Captain Obvious part of this episode, this thing is incredible to drive. That's not the surprising part. The surprising part is this: getting a guy who hates crossovers like me, you know this if you've seen any of my episodes, to admit this thing is incredible to drive. Because to me, a practical car is a Lotus Elise. If you need a little bit more practicality, that's what a Panamera Sport Turismo, preferably a GTS and above, was invented for. But Here's the thing. Back in 2015, this thing was already incredible to drive, and we drove it with Hurley. Now it's just a bit more sharp. So we don't need to spend a lot of time talking about whether this thing is good or not. What we need to understand is, why is it so important to Porsche that the thing is good? And to answer that question, Kumo did a little research and came up with some amazing numbers. So we looked at the sales figures of Porsches. And give you an idea, last month, November 2018, Porsche sold about 1,000 911s. Last year, 2017, they sold just under 9,000, this is in the US, 911s. Now, these are not the volume cars. The volume car is the Panamera or the Cayenne. So last year they sold 8,000, a little under 8,000 Panameras and a little over 9,000 Cayennes. Those are the volume cars. Last month, they sold 800 Panameras and just under 1,300 Cayennes. How many Macans did you think they sold in those same time periods? Any guesses? So if they sold, what, 1,300 Cayennes, maybe they sold, what, maybe 1,500 Macans? 1,600? 2,100 just in November of 2018. And last year, the entirety of 2017 in the US, they sold 22,000 Macans, more than the Panamera and Cayenne put together. That is why this thing is so incredible to drive, and why a guy like me has to admit it's actually fun to drive, and it's still a crossover. Now with that, I'm going to turn this around to you guys and ask you, do the sales figures, now that you know them, have a bigger impact on you in swaying you to a Macan, or it has no bearing, the car stands unto itself? Let me know in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoManTV all word, MotoManTV all word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And oh, by the way, let me know if you own and drive a Macan. And with that, I'm going to leave you with this. How many of you went to Radwood this year in LA? Did you get to meet my lovely date here? She was there amongst the BMW Z1. There was even an FDR X7. There was, oh my God, there was an S4 Lancia. Of course, Matt brought his Lamborghini and his Porsche. Oh, and there was an Oldsmobile Cruiser, a Vista Cruiser wagon. It didn't win any awards. That was the travesty of justice of the entire show. Now, I may do a whole episode on Radwood, I may not. Depends on whether I want to drive this thing on camera. Think of this as another question. Do you want to see a full episode on this car? Let me know in the comments below, or hit me up via, actually, you know what? Hit me up via our social media on my posts from Radwood on Instagram, because I put up a lot of pictures of this car. Comments below, Instagram, and then maybe we'll do a full episode for you. Till I see you next time. Bis später.